What's up, guys? It's me, Roku, back from vacation. I was enjoying my time in Turkey, Antalya, on the beach, sipping my beer and not having a single thought about League of Legends, but unfortunately, we are back. Fortunately, I mean, because we're back to create some amazing League videos for you guys. This video is going to be a tier list video, but not just the usual patch tier list video, but more so a general tier list video of the meta from now until the end of the season. So this video should be good until, for the remainder of Season 12. I've made two tier lists for low elo and one for high elo, with high elo being for ranks Diamond 2 and higher, or Master and higher according to some people, but you guys get the gist, right? High elo and low elo. Now, before I get into the specifics of the champions or just explaining the new things I've added to this tier list, I have a quick announcement to make. We're about to hit 20,000 subscribers on this YouTube channel. Thank you guys so much. To celebrate this, I'm deciding to host a clip contest. The idea is you send me your amazing clips, I rate them, and the winner, the best clip, gets a prize. And the prize is either a free coaching session or some RP. So yeah, if you want more info, click the link in the description to go to the video where I explain what to do and how to join. But yeah, without further ado, let's just get right into this video. Now, one thing I've added to this tier list that's noticeable from the start, I used to do this way back, is these difficulty borders. Now, I've added the legend or the color code for the difficulties in the bottom right of the screen. But just to go through them, green is super easy, yellow is just medium difficulty, orange is yellow but a bit more tricky, red is just hard to pick up and hard to master mechanically, and I've added a new difficulty level, which is kind of outside of the whole system of difficulty, one trick, right? These are champions where they're either so difficult or their gameplay is so unique that you just have to play that champion and just that champion alone to play them to the point where where I've put them in the tier list. So Kled, if you want to basically play Kled to the point where he's a strong champion, then you have to one-trick him, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it. I've also simplified the tiers. Without further ado, let's just get right into it. S tier, best climbers, low elo. Let's structure this. We're starting off with our low elo tier list first with S tier. So our S tier champions are Darius, Garen, Olaf, Tryndamere, and Wukong. Starting off here, Darius. Darius is just known as a great champion to pick up for a low elo player because he's a teacher of a lot of great lessons. He teaches you a lot about wave control, a lot about positioning. He has a way to just win every single fight through BS if the enemy messes up. So if you are just in a low elo match, it doesn't matter how well you pick your fights. If you just know how to play Darius well, you'll probably just brute force win them by landing that one lucky Q. And also, people aren't that good at kiting, so you should be able to brute force your way through backline heavy teams or even just range compositions. Range top laners if, you're in a sufficiently low elo game where range champions are not going to be played that carefully. Darius is a great champion to pick up, and the reason why his stats aren't always the best in low elo, as I've said always, is if a low elo player picks up Darius and they know how to play Darius, they're not going to be low elo anymore. So all the people in iron or gold or silver or bronze who are playing Darius who have low win rates with him are there because they've not yet mastered the champion. But if you do master the champion, you'll be out of low elo in no time. Next, we got Garen. Garen is the simplest champion in top lane to play, arguably. His mechanics are, mechanics. There are basically no mechanics to speak of, meaning that you can pick him up in 10 to 20 games easily. And he's a very nice champion because he has a lot of tools and he's a very generalist character, meaning that you can do a lot with him. And you can kind of fit him into many different compositions. You can fill many roles for your team, and you're just kind of like a jack of all trades character, especially in lower ranks where people will not be able to beat you, right? In low ranks, if you're a Garen player, if you just pick your fights correctly, you land your Q, you land your E, ignite, ult, and the enemy's just dead. And even if you do int, right, you're just super feeding, you're still a great source of just target selection, right? Let's say that the enemy team has a very fed character, a really fed character. Now, with your ultimate and your ignite, you can basically kill them from a third of their health, which is insanely invaluable, especially if that character is a champion that goes in on your team. If it's a Katarina or something, or someone in melee, Garen can be a really nice champion to just cancel them out and destroy them. And with how many ability spammy champions there are in the game right now, his silence is actually quite clutch. So Garen is a great champion for low elo, and honestly, with how simple he is, he should be in your champion pool, unless you just find him boring, which is quite understandable. Olaf. Olaf is a great champion in low elo. Once you get the hang of him, once you understand how to play him in the earlier lane and get to your level 6, the only kind of skillful part about him is just landing your Q. And once you're good at that, you should be able to just meathead your way through basically a lot of the matchups in top lane. Some of these matchups just rely on their stuns to stop you from killing them, but with Olaf, he just kind of goes through the stuns anyway, right? So he kind of ruins the gameplay loop of so many champions that he's just a very important champion to have in your champion pool. And he just, beats a lot of champions that typical bruisers and stuff kind of lose against. And for being such an easy-to-play champion, he gives a lot. So I can only recommend this champion for a lower elo player especially. You just kind of gotta understand how to play him earlier on. And if you start dying as Olaf, he will not be that useful. So there are some little caveats to his gameplay. Tryndamere. Now, Tryndamere has always been a great low elo pick in my opinion. Even after he got nerfed, he'll be like A tier at worst, because Tryndamere is just like, he is one of the best champions for a beginner top laner to learn the game off of. There's not a lot of entry cost in terms of having what you gotta learn with the champion. His only mechanics are just auto attacking, right? Auto attacking and just landing your E sometimes, which it's not hard to miss. But the difficult part is just positioning yourself with your E to the point where you don't E too far and the enemy can just kite your ult out or whatever, like things like that, right? These are things that you can just pick up intuitively. But Tryndamere exemplifies just that kind of lone wolfy playstyle where you just split push, you farm, you take half the enemy's jungle, you kill turrets, you flank people. So for a disorganized game, Tryndamere is an amazing champion. He teaches you the importance of farming as well, So if you're like in bronze, iron, or even like low silver-ish, then Tryndamere is an amazing champion to just like help yourself get better at top lane. And the best part about Tryndamere is that like, if you truly master him, he's one of those champions like Darius or whatever that you can kind of take with yourself into high elo. There's not really an elo where Tryndamere starts becoming useless, so he's a great champion to just have in your back pocket. And he's usually A tier or like at worst B tier in terms of just general meta, but low elo, he's one of the best champions to pick up. So yeah, S tier for low elo. Wukong, another great champion, a monster in team fights. His laning is great because he's got a lot of attack speed steroids that he can just abuse to get kills. Level 1. He's got a lot of like power in his level 6. He has arguably one of the best level 6 power spikes in the entire game. Like, this is like serious, right? With Ignite, both his ultimates and just his full kit, Wukong can kind of just one-shot people just straight from full health. Like, his ultimate is just that powerful. So even if you are struggling a bit, you can just bank on your ultimate, get Divine Thunder, maybe if you're struggling that hard, and then just one-shot someone completely. So yeah, Wukong is a great furry champion. That's with our S tier picks. Let's go into A tier, and I gotta drink some green tea to hydrate. Alright, A tier is Aatrox, Fiora, Illaoi, Irelia, Jax, Kled, Mordekaiser, Nasus, Ornn, Renekton, Riven, Sett, Shen, Tahm Kench, Trundle, Urgot, Volibear, and Yorick. Starting off at the left, Aatrox. Aatrox is always a great champion. He's got a lot of good laning power, and if you land your abilities properly, you're an absolute monster in earlier on fights, because like in early on fights with like cheese fights with multiple people, skirmishes in the rivers and whatnot, your Qs are absolutely crucial, right? You can get a lot of work done, and they're also CC, meaning that you can kind of CC people long enough for someone in that fight, let's say some other ally, right? They're about to die, but you dash in, you land that Q, and you CC the enemy long enough that you save your enemy, you save your ally, and then they can come back in and kill that enemy. So like things like this, right? CC is quite important in this game. Aatrox has a ton of that. He has a ton of damage, and the difficult part about him is that one, he's got a lot of annoying matchups that are just kind of disgusting to play, and two, you kind of have to be really good at landing your abilities, right? A lot of low elo Aatrox players do not know the value of their abilities, right? It's like, against some of these matchups, you cannot afford to miss your Qs. Against some matchups, if you just use your W to CS, then they can just run up at you and kill you because your W is just that important. So you have to learn these kinds of tricks, these kinds of stats, and these kinds of facts, I mean, and also how to land your abilities and etc. to really get good at Aatrox. But once you do get good at him, you get an amazing champion that's going to be with you in all ranks. He's a great character, and he's actually one of the more powerful characters right now in this meta. And he's at that point where he's very powerful, but not powerful enough for Riot to nerf, if you get what I mean. Kind of like Ornn, where like he's been so strong for so long, but he's not going to get nerfed. So Aatrox is going to be good for a while, until the end of the season, I'm predicting. Fiora. Fiora is not really your like piece of cake easy champion to pick up. She's quite difficult to master. Her kind of overpowered state is going down. She's like, mellowing out over time a bit, but she's still a pretty good character because Fiora is another one of those champions like Darius where if you just know how to play Fiora well, you can BS your way through an unimaginable amount of fights, right? If you can just land your vitals, you're just an absolute monster. And it's going to take a lot of people to take you down. She's a great split pusher. Her team fighting is a bit weak because, if she gets focused on, she just dies really quickly. And, her only defense is her riposte. But if you kind of play it a bit more flanky, and obviously if the enemy team is a lot more disorganized, they're just going to be coming at you one by one, and you can just land your vitals on each champion, one-shot them, go into the next one, and have your healing kind of support you, right? So yeah, Fiora is a great character if you pick her up. Illaoi. Illaoi is great in low elo, because in low elo, all people know how to do is just bash their heads into each other. Duh, I fight enemy die. It's like, I don't want to make fun of you guys, but, like, you're fighting your top laner, right? You're just fighting them as Illaoi. It's going normal, and then the jungler just jumps right into Illaoi, gets hit by her tentacle, and now the jungler has just activated Illaoi's most powerful state. Okay? And then you're a top laner, your jungler just went in, you're like, hey, I better save him, this guy's gonna int, and then you both die, right? How many times has that happened? Illaoi is just perfect at, like, punishing this kinds of like meatheadedness where people just go at her and she can just constantly just bash everyone's brains in with her tentacles because people just keep coming and she can just keep hitting them all and get a bunch of healing off. So yeah, she's great in low elo. She's actually not the worst split pusher in low elo because again, when people go at her, they don't really see her and do that stuff properly. So she can just, everybody goes in, half the team dies, but they kind of put her down, but that's still good for Illaoi's team still. Yeah, she's a great champion in low elo and she's also quite easy to learn because all you gotta know in terms of mechanics is just landing her E. If you know how to land her E, then you can get kills even if your kill's behind, okay? Illaoi kind of never just falls off, even if you are a few... Now, if you've died like 5-10 times, then it's not about falling off anymore, it's about just, you're not even in the game, okay? But if you're 2-3 kills behind, it doesn't really matter because you will scale up and be useful and powerful eventually and fulfill your purpose, okay? So Illaoi is great for lower ranks. Irelia, another champion who benefits from people just going at each other and just bashing their brains into each other. Irelia has a lot of fighting power in lane. She can just Q to all the minions and have like, 1.5 times the health to work with as opposed to the enemy champion. She can get a lot of auto attacks off, and if she packs like a lethal tempo or something, then she can actually get a ton of work with her passive. And it's really hard to build against Irelia because Nijitabi's is kind of works against her normal attacks, but I don't think Nijitabi's works against her passive because it does magic damage, right? And it's kind of not calculated like a normal passive, like Diana, for example, when she attacks you and she does magic damage, or Corki. I think those get blocked by Tabi's, but not Irelia's passive. It's just like it's so inconsistent how it works with champion to champion, right? It's not really known for being consistent when it comes to these tiny mechanics, and it's not consistent here. So Irelia it's hard to like build against her. She can win a lot of fights in lane. It's really hard to beat her in lane. And the most consistent way to beat her, which is just spam gank her, is not going to be a consistent thing in low elo because junglers don't know what they're doing, right? So like you're basically going to just like be an unstoppable laner, and as long as you learn a bit of wave control, you should be good to go to just being a fed monster and diving into the enemy backline and killing all of them. Jax is a bit of a tricky champion to pick up. His early game needs a lot of just understanding on how to play. He does come back into the game later on, but you really have to win lane as Jax to do a lot of work. There's a lot of work that you can do. He's great in split push situations, right? He's a great 1v1er. He's good at wasting time. He's not the best at escaping, but if you kind of ward the right places, if you kind of jump through walls and stuff, you can get away from a lot of collapses before they even come at you. And Jax, unlike the other split push champions, is quite useful in teamfights because he can just jump right into a backline, stun them, and still be tanky enough thanks to this ultimate to stay in the fight for a while and not just get immediately one-shot. So Jax is a great versatile champion that you can pick up and get a lot of work done with. Kled is quite a weird champion, to be honest, because his usefulness scales with how bad the enemy team is, if that makes sense, right? Or how bad the enemy top laner is, to make a correction. If your enemy top laner can't play this matchup, or they're filled, or they suck, then you are going to absolutely 1v9 the game just by yourself. Okay, you can completely just win the game by yourself thanks to your ultimate, thanks to you being like a big ball of stats, just killing everything. If your enemy top laner does not know what's going on, which is quite common because Kled is not that common of a matchup. But the thing with Kled, this comes into play in higher ranks, but in lower ranks, Kled can't get into like situations where like, you know, you just get a bunch of kills on your enemy, and then you're completely just unkillable. So yeah, I'm going to get into his weaknesses in higher reloads because that's when it comes to play. But for now, Kled is a great champion. If you want to trick him, if you know all his tricks, if you can land your Qs consistently, and you know how to use your E to not be kited and stuff like that. Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser is a great champion because Mordekaiser's weakness is that he's too slow, too predictable, and too outplayable. But no one does that in low elo. Slow is good in low elo. Nobody predicts, and nobody outplays, that's for sure. So Mordekaiser is great in low elo fights. You can just basically survive until level 6, and just meat man, brain dead, just kill someone, because they'll just fight you no matter what. And if you pick your Qs carefully, and just land solo Qs, by solo Q I don't mean like solo Q, but Q where it's just hitting the enemy champion and not the minions, you can really just kill someone level, like in the earlier levels, especially if you have Ignite. Mordekaiser can pack a lot of punch in straight up meat fights, especially in an elo where people like to just go for all-ins non-stop instead of shorter trades. So yeah, Mord is a great low elo champion. Nasus. In lower ranks, people don't really know how to push early game leads and stuff, and how to like really abuse you. You get into a lot of situations where like the enemy top laner picked Vayne, and you're like, okay, better go make some coffee or make myself dinner because I'm not going to be able to play this thing. You walk in, and the Vayne just sits back and just auto-attacks the minions, right? She's scared of you. Like, what is happening? But that's how it is in low elo. People don't really know how to just be up in your face and be aggressive, right? They don't really walk up on you and just make you regret existing. So this is perfect for Nasus, because Nasus loves just chilling. He's chill. He just chills earlier on. He sits, he farms, and he just basically lives in his own little world until he joins the game after like 400 or 500 stacks, maybe. I think Nasus is like at 2 items or so. He becomes tanky enough to the point where people can't just kill him, right? Not easily, anyway. So with you being offered a free ride to your powerful states, and with there not much happening around top lane earlier on anyway, Nasus is a great champion to play, especially if you're playing him against a character who's like, you know, like a meatball character, right? Like a Renekton or a Darius or someone who's like really good early, but people can't play them properly, right? They're not going to use their aggression against you properly. So you can just chill back, wait until level 6, and just force a fight where you just kill them. And now you, the champion who's a late game champion, or like mid to late game actually, you're now fed and you're ahead. And this champion who's supposed to get fed in 1v9 earlier on is now just useless. So these are kind of matches and situations that Nasus is really good at. And this is quite common in low elo, so he's quite a fun champion to play. And he does quite well into some of the meathead tanks and stuff as well. Ornn, speaking of meathead tanks, Ornn is a great character, really versatile. He doesn't really fall off at any rank. He's quite useful in terms of like for his team. He's got a lot of CC. He's insanely tanky, right? Tanks are tanky, but Ornn is a different tanky. So every single stat he buys just gets multiplied by the percentages and stuff he has. So he just gives free gold stats to his team. He's an amazing team player. But in case you're all about that solo Q 1v9 life, Ornn can pack a punch, right? Ornn can seriously just one-shot people in lane out of nowhere. And he's actually quite a good trader, so you can just whittle people down and kill them, no problem. So he's a great champion for all ranks, actually. Renekton. Renekton is just your typical classic steak, good old beefy bruiser who does a lot of work done early game. He can, you know, do a lot of damage. He can do a lot of carrying. He's great in team fights. If you get like Prowler's Claw, you can just jump on ADCs and just one-shot them in 2 seconds, or backliners in general. So Renekton can get a lot of work done. This other power of his W does not come into effect until later on in ranks, but basically, in high elo, Renekton's W is one of the best things for a jungler because it's point-and-click CC that cannot be avoided. So Renekton gets that off, and this is just free Nidalee Spears, this is free Elise Cocoons, this is free combos for a jungler, and they don't even have to, like, waste their flash or whatever. So Renekton's quite good in low and high elo, but he does have a lot of, you gotta basically learn how to play him, right? Manage your passive and stuff like that. Riven. Riven is a great champion. She's arguably one of the best solo queue champions in the entire game. Not just top lane, but just entire game, right? If you just one-trick her and know what you're doing, you can seriously just, like, use her to climb to, like, the highest of ranks. There's no stopping you except you. So, Riven is a great champion. She does take a lot of mechanical prowess to play. If you have, like, wrist issues like carpal tunnel or whatever, or like you're a coder and you just don't want to cause those issues, then I would say stay away from Riven. But if you're like a youngish person and you got the skills for it, the Riven is excellent. Just don't watch anime. just kidding. But still, great champion. She's a bit more useful in higher elo because one of Riven's greatest advantages is her mobility. And her mobility is not really unlocked in terms of its power until you as a Riven player understand what's going on. And you're not really going to, in terms of the macro game, until you're a bit higher ranks. So yeah, she's just A tier for low elo, but she's still a great solid champion. Sett. Now, I argued with myself as to whether I'm going to put Sett in the higher tier, but this is for the, for this season, right? So because of that fact, I have to put Sett in just A tier, right? I hate to do this, but Sett is just struggling right now. He's at the weakest point he's ever been, in my opinion. Now, that weakest point is still okay for a lot of ranks and stuff, but you can see this the most clear in high elo, where he is just struggling to just get anything done. So, yeah, Sett in terms of a champion is great at fights. He's great at meat fights, which is what everybody likes. His W, an amazing source of damage, is not really dodged that often in low elo. In low elo, you do it, and then the enemy champion just stands still and it just keeps attacking you. Like not even looking at the W. 2k damage, even though they're critting you for 1k every auto. But still, right? It's like, they're not going to see it coming. I mean, they'll see it, but they just won't dodge it, right? So nobody dodges his W in low ranks, which makes it so that, like, his one big nuke is actually more consistent than it should be. So yeah, Sett is a great champion. He's also great at skirmishes, can get a lot of work done, a lot of healing. Just in big, meaty brawls, Sett can get a lot of work done, which is why he's a great champion for a low elo player. And he's really easy to pick up, right? There's not a lot of complexity to his kit, and the most you gotta know about is just, like, how to use your abilities. Like, it's just general, but like how to stun people, what to, like, dodge with your abilities, these kinds of, like, simple-ish things, right? Just with champion knowledge, if you just know what champions do, you should be able to automatically connect, okay, when Darius presses Q, I'm going to ult him and I'll automatically dodge you. Like, things like this, So yeah, Sett's A tier. Shen. Shen is an amazing champion for top laners. He teaches a lot of good lessons. He's really strong earlier on. By lessons, I mean macro, right? Not a lot of top laners teach anything about macro, but Shen is one of those champions where there's a lot that he can show you in terms of how to think about the map, which I think is very important for developing top laners. He's great to have in your champion pool because he's not even that complicated. You can just kind of learn his basics, learn how to get through the early lane with him, and then just apply your macro knowledge and improve it to really get through the later portions of the game where you don't fight your opposing top laner, you just match them, and then you teleport to your allies and carry the fight there. That kind of playstyle is very, very good for solo queue. Now, he should be S tier, and he would be if we're talking higher elo, but because he's not really the whole 1v90 champion, I am putting him down in A tier, so yeah, there he is. Good old Shen. Tahm Kench. Tahm Kench is great in low elo because the thing about Tahm Kench is that you either know what he does or you don't, okay? He's not a champion that you outplay in the middle of the fight per se, but you just kind of know his tricks or you don't, okay? The thing with Tahm Kench is that, like, in the middle of the fight, he's not really that outplayable, okay? He just walks up at you, spam autos you, Qs you, slows you. His Q does a ton of damage. It heals him. He has a bunch of CC, which you can set up his little dive thing with. His shield is just very consistent, I guess. His shield is quite weak nowadays, actually, ever since they nerfed it. But still, right, he's not that easy to just straight up outplay. Which means that in low elo, where people just straight up go into fights without thinking. Tahm is a great champion to just BS kill someone and be an unbeatable tank monster. Like, just once you win lane at Tahm Kench, you're legit a boss battle. Like, the enemy Jinx and Nami are walking in Baron, they see your team, they run away, and then Tahm Kench pops up behind them. It's like, just, like, the health bar pops up, you know, the boss battle has begun, except you're just gonna kill them both. So it's like, he's a great champion at just, like, you know, you win lane through a bunch of cheese, like you eat your enemy, spit them out under your turret, you do a bunch of these tricks like that, you set up these kinds of uncounterplayable kills, and then you just get, like, massively fed, and you can be an absolute, like, crazy unkillable monster. And, like, the thing with Tahm is that, like, only those tricks take skill. None of the rest of anything takes skill with Tahm. He's so easy to play, and he doesn't have that much counterplay, so Tahm Kench is quite powerful in low elo. Trundle. I mean, I don't really have to explain much about this champion. He's just your typical fight enemy, except he wins fights. All of them. I don't think it's possible for Trundle to lose level 1 with lethal tempo ignite against anybody. He just straight up kills everything level 1. It's just he's just a complete menace. You get a bunch of these kills and, you know, you're going to be an absolute menace. He's great at split pushing, right? He kills turrets in seconds. His 1v1 just keeps scaling and scaling and scaling. So unless you're fighting a champion that's, like, specifically good at 1v1s, you're gonna be able to just straight up beat them. There's not a lot of outplay you can do on him, and his only unique mechanic that requires skill is basically the pillar, right? But, like, you don't really need to master that for low elo. You just gotta understand how to play this champion, just the basics of it, and you should be good to go. The pillar is actually great in team fights because your pillar can, like, mess with dashes, right? So if you use your pillar properly, you can really trap people and guarantee kills, get picks for your team, and just be a playmaker, right? A lot of these champions, like, let's say, you know, your Riven or whatever, or your Tryndamere, they're not playmakers, right? A lot of these champions aren't. Tryndamere can be, right? So he has that bit of versatility in him to just, like, oh, this ADC is just walking alongside this wall, I'm going to put a pillar right here, so they have to walk all the way around, and this gives us enough time to shoot, like, a CC or something, and then just destroy them in 1 second. So it's like, if you have the careful eye, you can be a very nice champion for your team. Urgot. Urgot is amazing in lower ranks because he is essentially just a tank that kills people. I mean, I know tanks are just, like, they do that fine. You know, we're talking about Ornn, who just has, like, a 200% health magic damage combo or whatever, but Urgot is just kind of like a DPS, if that makes sense, right? He's just kind of like is this walking wall of death that the enemy can't really do too much against if they don't really know how to play the game. And Urgot's weakness, which is just getting through the earlier laning phase, you're not going to face it that much. So Urgot is pretty good in lower ranks. You just get to your powerful points and you get some work done. Volibear. Volibear is a champion. He's quite easy to pick up, and his main gameplay cycle doesn't have that much counterplay, so you should be able to, like, set up cheese kills and then just follow up on them and destroy people non-stop. Volibear also has a lot of great matchups, and once he gets fed, he is really just a monster because he can get a lot of work done for his team. He's an engage, right? If somebody's caught off guard or somebody's, like, alone, he can be like he can just catch them, right? He can cross through walls with his ultimate and get a ton of damage done and just work with his team, right? And he's not really the best at any specific thing, but once he gets fed, he can just do a lot of things, right? And he's a great help for his team, and he's also a pretty decent brawler. He's not as good a brawler as some of the other champions, but he can throw down with some of the bigger boys, especially if you're playing him, like, I was gonna say playing him properly, but there's not much you can do. All you do is just spam W. But, you know, like, if you get fed, you can get a lot of work done for your team. His only issue is that if you don't get fed and if you just start inting, then he is worthless, right? You gotta win lane with him. But the good thing is, because your Q is essentially point and click CC, and if you time it right with your E, it's a guaranteed land, you're basically setting up fights to win them before they even start, before the enemy can even do anything about it. Yorick. Yorick is a great champion in lower ranks. There's not much to learn mechanically. The only thing that you gotta learn about him is kind of how to split push and how to not get beaten up by some of the more aggressive champions who can't just bully you, right? So if you kind of get over these kinds of champions who mess your life up, then you can really get a lot of work done with Yorick. He has a lot of great matchups, especially into the more immobile champions that's going to be played in top lane, And if you can land your wall, that is the fight won for you right there. Because basically that wall kind of destroys a lot of champions, and it also sets up your E, or I think it's the W, I don't know, the skill shot, right? The wall sets up the skill shot, and also vice versa, because the skill shot slows, and then your maiden jumps in, your ghouls jump in, and basically most of that guy's health is gone, so the fight's already over. And also what Yorick can do, once he hits level 6, he can basically just slow push a massive wave, and keep in mind, unless you're inting, right? If you're even with the enemy as Yorick, you just played safe, you've got your maiden, you can basically just constantly slow push, toss your skill shot that aggroes the ghouls onto the enemy, have them beat the enemy champion down under turret, and then just leave. Constantly, non-stop, just poke the enemy down under their own turret until they have to leave, giving you the turret. Like, unless your jungler helps you destroy the Yorick, there's not really much you can do against them. So if you can get to this point as the Yorick, then you're basically looking at a game where you will be that split pushing monster who just eats turrets up in microseconds. So he's a great champion in lower ranks, and possibly the easiest one to split push because of just how fast he split pushes. And his minions kind of do all the wave clearing, pushing, all this kind of things for him, right? So yeah, B tier, normal champions. We got Akshan, Camille, Cho'Gath, Dr. Mundo, Gnar, Gwen, Kayle, Pantheon, Quinn, Rengar, Singed, Teemo, Vladimir, Warwick, and Yon. Let me drink some tea. I'm dehydrated. I brought this tea back from Turkey, by the way. It's great. Very fragrant. Anyway, let's start off with Akshan. Akshan's a good champion to just have in your champion pool. He can also be flexed mid. It's just like top lane is just one of those roles that you can play, so he's a very versatile champion in terms of where you can play him. Well, just mid and top, but still, those are good rules, right? If you have the macro to just roam around and get a bunch of kills, you can absolutely just 1v9 games, but this is what's holding him back, because you're not going to get that macro until you're later on. You're better at the game, right? So he's kind of not that good for lower elo players. He's just a normal strength, where if you can kind of, play your matches to the point where you're not dying, just basically just wave clear and avoid top laners and then just go fight the rest of the team, then you're going to be doing quite well for yourself. But like, most of his strength comes into the higher ranks, which is why I put him in B tier instead of a higher tier. But overall, he's a great champion to pick up if you're looking for like the roamy playstyle. But instead of having to like go into the fight, you're mostly looking for like, you come around the fight, you pick up one kill and then you leave, right? Or you pick up a bunch of stragglers and then you kill them all and then you leave. The good thing about Akshan in low elo is that in low elo, people don't really care about vision. People don't look at the map. So people won't really see your ganks coming at all. Which means that, like, although you will have the macro to get a lot more perfect gank stuff in higher elo, in lower elo, your ganks, although you will not be able to pick the best ones, they will just work because nobody sees ganks coming in lower ranks. So Akshan can get a ton of work done if you kind of have the right attitude of, hey, this lane is not where I'm going to get most of my gold. It's elsewhere. So yeah. Camille. Camille is a great champion if you can pilot her to the point where she gets her first item, which is her Sheen item, Divine Sunder, or Triforce. Now, before then is where she runs into issues. Now, if this was higher elo, and I do it in my high elo tier list, she goes into A tier, right? Because in high elo, people know this about Camille. If I get this Camille fed, thinks her jungler, then she's going to destroy the entire enemy team and make this match way easier for me. But in low elo, your junglers are not going to think that, but they're not going to think at all. So you're basically looking at just having to play by yourself and survive, right? So that's why Camille gets a little bit more tough to play, because if you're up against really bad matchups, they will just make your life an absolute nightmare. So like getting to that point of that first Sheen item will not be that easy, but if you do play properly, you will get there eventually. And once you do, you are an absolute monster. And some of these harder matchups, you can just straight up beat them with that Sheen item, especially if it's Divine Sunder, because Divine is a great item. Anyway, there's not really much to say. Cho'Gath. Cho'Gath is a great champion for lower ranks if you can land your abilities. His abilities are kind of like, they're not slow, but you can tell when the Cho'Gath is gonna toss them, right? Which is why he does better in low elo than higher elo, because in low elo, you can just kind of spam your abilities, right? Land them, get into the bush, get a cheese ability off, get a combo, and back off, and then heal up by CSing, and then just go back in again and one-shot the enemy with your ultimate. So Cho'Gath does far better in low elo than higher elo. And a great thing about Cho'Gath is that his passive gives him free sustain, meaning that, like, you don't really have to worry about, you know, managing your mana as strongly as you would with other champions who spam abilities in lane. So yeah, Cho'Gath is a pretty decent champion in low elo, and he's actually really useful into the later portions of the game. He can be great peel for his team, get a lot of work done. His big size is just like, you catch stray skill shots, you're there for your team. It's just your presence is like gonna be a real good thing for your backline if you're with them, or really terrifying for the enemy because they have to deal with you, which creates space for a lot of your allies to get some work done. Like, you know, you can't deal with that talent if this massive Cho'Gath is sitting on your head, you know? So you're kind of getting what I'm saying, right? So yeah. Mundo is better in low elo because of how simple he is. He's kind of like Garen in that, like, you know, because players are so bad, his simplicity is like a strength, because they're going to play a more complicated champion. They're going to mess things up. You're not. You're just going to brain dead, fight them, and just survive and beat them, right? Ever since they nerfed anti-heal, the classic counter to Mundo of just you buy Executioner's level 6 has kind of not been a thing anymore, because it's just 25%, which Mundo can just breeze through, right? His ultimate is still pretty strong in terms of how much it heals him. So yeah. Overall, he's still kind of a lane holder in that he sits in lane, he kind of just protects it. But in terms of, like, just these kinds of cheese kills you can get by choosing a random fight, if you are able to pick those out, kind of like how you can pick, like with Garen, Q, Ignite, ult, E-ult kind of fights, if you can pick those kinds of kills, they can scale into a champion that's massive, that runs up to people because of your passive, you know, you block CC, and just basically autos people to death. He gets a lot of power once he gets going, and he's able to just run up into a backline without them getting peel, right? A lot of these champions also, you know, succeed because there's not a lot of peel from backline to just stop them. Gnar would usually be higher on these kinds of tier lists, but because it's low elo, not really. Gnar is great in lane, and Gnar is good at supporting his team, but he can't really do too much on his own, right? He's not a 1v9 champion. He doesn't have that much damage. And although he's good at fights where he's fighting disorganized players, it's like, he's not like a Katarina who's going to kill everyone. He's going to kill one person and then maybe another if they're close by. He's just there to, like, do a bit of everything, if that makes sense. And that's quite useful in higher ranks, because if you can hold your lane and be useful for your team, that's good enough for your team. Because let's say your team has that Fed Jinx. You got to play around that Fed Jinx, and nothing else matters. Not you having your little personal 1v9 top laner fantasy. Like, that doesn't matter, right? You got to play for your win condition, which happens more in higher ranks. But in lower ranks, if that Fed Jinx is just going to walk in and die anyway, she's not at win condition. You have to be. So, you know, things get a bit more awkward. Gwen is a pretty good scaling champion. She just gets her head bashed in by a lot of these characters just running. Like, ever since they made a bunch of changes to her, right, it became a bit more easy to fight her, because she can't just, you know, blow everything on you in like 1 second. She has to kind of wait. Her ultimate, it has like a 1 second timer, so it takes like 1 second cooldown. Like, her ultimate's like an ult, right? But they added like a time between each of the ults. So instead of using everything in like a second just real quickly, she can just, like, she could have just one-shot you like that, but she has to actually wait now, which gives her enemy enough time to kind of one-shot her, to avoid her Q, and then just destroy her. A lot of champions in here also are great at just moving around, dodging things. So, like, Gwen kind of struggles at that in higher elo, but in higher elo, her 1v9 comes in more into play. In terms of just, like, the sort of champions that are played in low elo, though, because they won't be dodging and they'll just be in your face eating your damage, you kind of get into positions where you just cheese kills using your level 6, and you turn into an unstoppable 1v9ing monster. It's just that she kind of runs into issues in lane where if you're up against a person who kind of understands how to play, they will just completely dismantle you. And also, Gwen is not that easy to play, because your W is so important that if you waste it, it's just gone, man. Like, you're destroyed in seconds. That W steroid is really, really, really necessary for you to actually be able to do anything in the fight. And in team fights, if you waste your W, you are gone, man. It's like, a Gwen without W in team fights is just, like, completely destroyed, right? You gotta just be 4 or 5 items to not be useless in these kind of situations, which, you know, it does happen more often in low games, but, you know, it's like a conditional, right? Unless you're fed, you're likely gonna be 2-3 items until the end of the game, right? The game's gonna end by the time you get your 3rd item. Kayle. Kayle is decent in low elo because of the same reason as Nasus. People don't punish early game champions as hard, so you kind of get into the point where you skip like level 11, 2-3 items where you're just one-shotting people left and right, just melting them in seconds. And also her ult can get a lot of work done because in low elo, the champions, let's say, who rely on executes, they're not going to see your ultimate coming, right? So you can just ult, block their kill, and then they'll just go, huh? This thing that happens 50 times happened the 51st time? Whoa, she blocked my kill. And then just, you know, ruin their mojo, so to speak, right? So yeah, you get a lot of work done with her ultimate, but her main thing is scaling, and her scaling is going to be much easier in low elo where people don't necessarily punish you. And Kayle actually has an underrated bit of 1v1 power. You just got to pick your fights carefully, and then just, like, do damage to the enemy over time without them noticing, and then just, like, it's too late by the time they notice that, okay, I don't have the HP to beat this Kayle anymore. Pantheon. Pantheon is a great champion, got lots of roam potential. He's a monster when he's fed. It's just, Pantheon is a paintbrush you paint yourself onto the Summoner's Rift with. A lot of things you can do with this champion, lots of damage. He's not really, like, you really have to just win lane with him to get a lot of things done. If you fall behind as Pantheon, you are just, like, it's like, you're going to have a few more fights where you're useful, but unless you get kills on those fights, you are just done. Pantheon is a very easy champion to just fall behind and just be useful with, so that's why he's kind of B tier, right? You have to at least be even, and then use your ultimate to get kills from outside of lane, okay? You got to get work done. You have to get kills. You have to, like, work with your team or alone to get some sort of gold, because without gold, Pantheon can't really be that much of a threat. Quinn. Quinn is kind of good. I mean, there's not much to say, really. She's another ranged champion. It's just that, like, once she gets level 6, her roams are just completely unmatched. The same reason as Akshan in terms of, like, people don't see roams coming. You can just get, like, your ultimate and just run around the map getting a bunch of kills and then being fed. Quinn kind of runs into issues in that against united teams, she can't really get a lot of work done because to do her damage, she has to go in, right? Her aura range is pretty short, okay? So she's putting herself in the range of a lot of mages' abilities, and to really do her one-shot combo, she has to use her tumble, or headbutt, I think, tumble's Vin. She has to use her headbutt, which does put her in range to just get destroyed and CCs, so yeah. Her position doesn't really change from like low or high elo, but these are just the issues that she runs into. But if you pick her into a good matchup where you don't actually lose 1v1, then it's far easier for you to get to a point of level 6 where you can just, you know, run around the map and kill everyone, which makes it a lot easier to basically take over the game as her. Rengar. Rengar is insanely hard to play. I'll actually put him as, like, one trick, because you really got a one-trick Rengar top to play him that well, right? He's got a lot of, like, creativity you can use in terms of, like, your bush jumps, because your bush jumps are essentially infinite mobility, provided you're inside a bush, right? No cooldown, no nothing, no resource spent, but you have to use it intelligently, okay? And there are some matchups in top lane for Rengar that just absolutely destroy him, no matter what kind of clown tricks that you do. You just get destroyed no matter what. So, because of the matchups being quite tough, and because playing him is just quite difficult, he's never going to be too high on tier lists, but he's still a solid champion to play for top lane, especially if you have, like, a jungler Rengar player. The issue is that Rengar top plays very much differently from Rengar jungle. With Rengar jungle, it's all about being at the right place at the right time, whereas with Rengar top, it's kind of playing through the fight and then just avoiding the right things, if that makes sense. Just like with Rengar jungle, you win the fight before it happens, right? You set up the good fight. With Rengar top, you have to win the fight in the middle of it, and if you misplayed, you might lose, okay? You gotta use your W properly, you gotta use your tactics, like, hey, This guy beats me in trades, so what I'm going to do is go in, WW, and run out of their CC and just, basically be unaffected by the trade where, like, I'm not going to do too much damage to them, but I'm basically taking no damage because I do WW, right? Things like this that you got to just get used to. I'm also a little sick, if you guys haven't noticed. Singed top. Singed is a champion that you have to one-trick because he plays the game differently to everyone else, right? He's just... His proxy thing, his running up and down the map like an animal with predators, perma-ganking people getting kills. Like, his whole thing is just completely different from everyone else. Now, he can get a lot of work done if he's fed, right? And he's got Rylai's, he could just go into a team, cause so much havoc and mayhem that, like, it becomes really easy for the rest of his team to pick up the pieces and then just put down anybody left. Because Singed going there and doing his work is just going to be, like, very just chaotic and disorganizing for the enemy team. They're going to blow some of their spells on you, potentially even chase you, right? If you almost die and you run away, some idiot's going to run after you, but hey, this idiot is required to peel their ADC. Oh no, they're dead. They've lost a team fight. So you can get a lot of work done with Singed, but laning in the traditional way as Singed is not that good in that, like, he's got a lot of matchups that just completely destroy him. So if you can't proxy, if you can't get work done around the map, then you're not going to succeed that much. Teemo. Teemo is basically the best top laner, range top laner for lower ranks because of how simple he is, right? Now, with Teemo, the name of the game is surviving until level 6. Until level 6, you are jungler food. But once you get level 6, your shrooms are so invaluable in protecting your lane. Because you can basically completely shroom out all top lane entrances, and even if the enemy jungler doesn't step on them, they're essentially wards. So, like, it gives you vision, and when the enemy jungler sweeps to, like, kill them, then you're gonna actually see them, right? If you pay attention, oh no, the vision just disappeared, but, I know why it disappeared. It's still alive, but the vision's not there because they're killing it, whatever, right? It's like, you can tell if someone's coming. And you can just use your insane amount of move speed to just run away and be unkillable while still pestering your opposing top laner. The main issue with low rank teams is that they use their shrooms to just clear wave, right? They pop them down in the middle. While that's a good tactic to just throw them down in the middle of the fight to, like, create more space between you and the enemy, that's an okay tactic, but that's all low elo Teemos use it for, right? In higher elos, Teemos kind of change in that, like, they use their shrooms intelligently, and, like, the thing with Teemo is that if you're fighting the right Teemo, you should not be able to run around the map without sweeper, right? You just can't. If you do, you all lose like a third of your healths before the fight even begins, which is great for Teemo's team. But this kind of Teemo is rare to come up on. Vladimir needs to scale up, but guess what? Here in Lowland, everybody likes to just let people scale up, so you're going to get a lot of work done with Vladimir. Just get your 2 items for free, cheese a few kills under the enemy turret with Ignite, Ultimate, Ghost, whatever, at level 6, and get fed and just completely stomp team fights. There's not much to say here. Warwick. I don't like Warwick as a solo queue option, but if you're so desperate that you just need a brain-dead champion to just get kills in lane with, and you just make sure the enemy top laner is useless while you're kind of somewhat useful, then Warwick is a great pick. He's got a bunch of good matchups, so if somebody picked a matchup that you really hate playing against, you can just pick Warwick, completely destroy them, render them useless, and then, you'll at least be more useful than them for your team, right? But he's not really a 1v9 champion. You're strictly playing to control top lane, and you're very useful also in these kinds of skirmishes around the map. But, the thing about Warwick is that when he's coming for a gank, he can it just tells you that he's coming over. So it's like, he kind of falls off in higher ranks, which I'll get to. Yone. Against players who don't really dodge or whatever, Yone can just land all of his Qs, all of his abilities. And with Yone, it's like, because he has so much CC, he doesn't have a lot of CC like a Nautilus, but he has a lot of CC for the type of champion he is. This basically lets him get into fights where the fight starts off steadily, but he kind of lands all his CC on you, and he kills you before you even realize that you're already dead, if that makes sense. It's like, he just stacks his leader tempo up, he lands his, empowered Q, the knock-up one, lands his ultimate, and it's just like, okay, I lost almost 100 HP, I can't do anything against him because I'm CC'd the whole time, and you kind of run into this a lot against Yone players, because they can just, again, brain dead land everything on you and beat you. On high elo, Yon can't really, and also in low elo, Yon can't really put up a fight against some of the more aggressive, meaty top laners. He just does get destroyed. But in high elo, this is kind of solved with players just playing it better and playing things, but not solved to the point where he's like an A, B tier, like an S tier champion, right? So this, which is why he's in B tier. Okay, Jesus, we've been going on for 50 minutes, and my will, health, and body are being tested. All right, C tier. We're starting off with Gangplank, then Akali, Cassio, Karma, Malphite, Gragas, Sion, and Vayne. Gangplank is not really the best champion to 1v9 climb with. He's okay in that, like, you know, he generates a lot of gold. You can play him right to, like, kite and stuff, but he's way too hard to master to play that way for a low elo player. So, like, he's just not strong enough in low elo, because what he does offer to the game in terms of team fight one-shots is just, it just does not come into play soon enough, right? He just doesn't scale. Like, first off, getting through lane with Gangplank takes a lot of skill. If you play him properly, then you will get through it, like, without any hit, like, you know, just anything going wrong, but that needs a lot of skill to do. And most low elo Gangplanks don't know what they're doing. They just constantly die for no reason. And once Gangplank dies once, he can just get farmed for the rest of the game just completely. And he can't even one-shot people anyway, because Gangplank needs to, like, consistently, safely farm to actually scale to the point where he doesn't one-shot people with his barrel combos. Akali. Akali is okay in that she is usually given her level 6 power spike for free, but honestly, she's just somewhat way too... I put her red, just like... I do micro corrections as I go over champions. She's just way too difficult to play for a low elo player to just pull off. Also gotta put Teemo in orange. Yeah, there we go. Got it mixed up, I think. But yeah, she's way too difficult to pull off to the point where you're not really going to be unlocking a big portion of her power spike, or not power spike, over power. You're not going to be utilizing her power properly, if that makes sense, okay? It's like, this is for more complicated games with better players, okay? Just, like, it takes so much time to get used to her tricks, and even then you gotta know so much about the game that you're better off just going for a simpler champion where learning the game is just far easier. It's just low elo, Akali is way too complicated and no one plays her properly, so I don't really recommend her. Kind of similar thing with Cassio. Range top laners in general suck in low elo because playing a range top laner is not that it's not that easy. I mean, just it's like they come with their own sort of difficulty of, hey, I have to perfectly space this enemy champion, which is more difficult than you realize, because you don't have to just do it for a few seconds, you have to do it for the entire lane. And if you mess up once, you might just be dead, right? And that's just not that easy. And Cassio has to land a lot of abilities. There's a lot of clicks you gotta do on your mouse and keyboard, so it's like, it's quite a tough champion to actually get a hold of, especially for lower ranks. Karma, I'm not gonna say too much, right? She just doesn't carry. She doesn't do too much for her team. She's okay at holding lane, but, you know, it's like, you're not really doing anything. You're not really doing a lot of damage. You're not doing too much. Unless you closely play with someone and just closely play with your team, then you'll basically be far less useful for your team than the enemy top laner is. So the best you can do as Karma is just annoy the enemy top laner. Malphite. He's a great counter pick, right? He's a great counter pick. But aside from that, there's not much else you can do. If you're like an Iron player, like if you're like super low, then you can get some use out of him, because if you're at that low of a rank, then he's one of those so simple that because there's nothing for you to mess up, you can actually kind of climb a bit, those kind of champions, but he should be reserved to be used just as a counter pick. Gragas. Gragas' power in top lane is being blind pickable, is being like, he's just impossible to put out of lane, but he's just not a champion that gets fed, goes out, split pushes, gets a lot of work done, carries team fights on his own. He's just not this kind of champion, these are the things that you kind of need to carry low elo games. Sion's like, he's kind of past his glory days of split pushing. You can't really split push as him anymore. He's just another tank, essentially, and you can just play Ornn, honestly. He's like, if you're playing just another tank, you might as well just play Ornn. So Sion is really low tier at all ranks until someone finds another way to break the game with him again. Vayne. Again, right, range top laners aren't that easy to play, and although Vayne has a lot of free things in her kit that help her manage with a lot of these meatheads, there's also a lot of champions that can just jump on her and one-shot her really quickly. So, like, unless you're playing against like an entire team of players team of champions who you can just counter and just kite as Vayne, then you're not going to be having the best of times as Vayne in lower ranks. Not to mention how, again, ranged top laners aren't good champions to play in lower ranks. D tier: Ryze, Yasuo, Swain, Jace, and Kennen. Ryze sucks. Yasuo is way too hard to play. Like, you should not play Yasuo top as a low elo player. Like, let's just be real, right? I mean, you shouldn't be playing Yasuo as a low rank player, but like, Yasuo top is just League on Nightmare difficulty. Like, but is there just normal Nightmare difficulty? You've activated a secret door code that makes the game even harder, removes the HUD, you can't play with one hand. It's like, is that amount of difficulty compared to just playing the game like a normal human being? Don't play Yasuo top unless you are a Smurf, and you can guarantee that you're way better than your enemy, which is not always going to happen. Swain can't really defend himself. He's not a great top laner pick. I guess in low elo you can get a bunch of work done, right? He's kind of bad in high elo, but I guess in low elo, if you're fighting against someone who doesn't know what they're doing in terms of just punishing you, then you might be able to get some cheese work done, but like, I honestly don't really recommend it, because the second one of these guys realizes, hey, I can kill this guy, you are doomed. Jace. Jace used to be way better earlier on, but unfortunately he sucks right now. Not to mention how he's like one of the more complicated champions to play in the game. He's just horrible right now, so try to stay away from him. And if you're a Jace one trick, God help you. Kennen, range top laner. He's okay in some lanes in low elo, but I just recommend staying away from him. Just not good for these ranks. Alright, we're done with the low elo part of this video. Let's go into the high elo tier list, starting off with Darius. Darius has become a bit more situational in higher ranks, but the situations where he is strong are just way more common now. And when he is strong in a situation, he practically almost wins it single-handedly. So he just needs a bit more help, and he just completely annihilates everyone by himself. Gragas. Gragas, just holding lane, is far more useful in high elo. Like, the fact that he could just exist in lane and not get pushed out and be just an amazingly strong laner means that Gragas can basically just survive against anybody and still be useful to his team without even getting fed, right? You can go with some messed up builds like with First Strike and then just still constantly make money even though he can't really CS every single CS. So yeah, Gragas is a great champion. He can be the only top laner that you even play, and you can just use that to basically like if you are a high elo player and you want to just flex to top lane, you could just have like, you know, Gragas as the only top laner that you play, and you should be good to go. Jax. Jax's spot in the meta is almost always great, but he's the strongest when top lane is populated by a lot of all-attack reliant champions, right? And right now, that's kind of accurate, right? So Jax is going to do quite well from now until the end of the season, I think. Ornn, same deal with Gragas. Holding lane is way more important now, and because Ornn provides additional things on top of that, he's a great champion, right? He can win lane, get a lot of work done, but his main use is with his team, right? Let's say you're Jinx, who's the win condition, gets that IE. Now, because you exist, you just made her more powerful by upgrading her items, right? Or just, you know, well, you can't upgrade, you have to upgrade your mythic, but still, right? You make her items more powerful and just give free stats to your team. And giving free stats to your team gives free stats for yourself. So Ornn is just really great where you're playing with a more organized team and you're playing together, right? So Ornn, really powerful champion, and he will never be nerfed. Never. So yeah. Riven, you got that macro knowledge. You can actually use that mobility to your advantage, so go get him, Tiger. You as well. Shen, if you understand how to actually fight properly against competent players in the earlier lane, like earlier stages of the lane, like, because this is high elo, people will know the kind of things that a Shen can do. So fighting some of these champions from level 1 to 6 is going to be quite tough, and surviving against them in the side lane after that is going to be also tough. But if you understand how to just survive, how to get kills even, or, you know, and in addition to that, how to ult at the right moment, then you should be doing quite well as Shen. He's basically one of the best champions in the game in higher ranks. Also, Dragon is way more important now than it was before, because Riot just buffed it up, remember? So Shen is quite powerful as a character. A tier. Aatrox, nothing much to say here. Akshan, more macro, better roams, etc. Camille, because your junglers are now thinking and they're actually sentient beings, they're going to be like, hey, you know, if I get this Camille fed if I make sure that she gets her first item, then she's going to have a very good time just 1v9 in this game. She can just destroy everybody. So with Camille getting more help in higher ranks, I think that she belongs a higher tier. Nothing different with Fiora. Gnar, the whole jack of all trades, helping your team with like, team fights, Mega Gnar engage, just holding 3 people down or pestering someone, making sure they don't get to the rest of your team. These kind of things that Gnar can do are way more important in higher ranks. Olaf. People are better at abusing his early game, not to mention how in higher ranks people play dash champions a lot more, which just ruins Olaf's time because Olaf can't get through walls, right? If you just dash over a wall, that's it. You've countered Olaf. Congratulations. So yeah, he's a bit weaker, but he's still pretty useful as a top lane pick if you pick him into the right matchup, or if you know enough about him to just survive and then just get the kill in level 6 and take over the top side of the map and cheese kills. Renekton. Nothing much to say here, really. His point-and-click stun comes more into handy, though he does get peeled a bit more. It's like, he's still going to get a lot of work done and just create a big opening for his team to get a kill or so and just win the team fight. Tryndamere and Wukong are kind of like the same-ish in that, like, they don't get weaker in higher elo per se, but these champions kind of just get stronger, if that makes sense, right? So I hope that makes sense, but it's like, there's nothing really that kind of ruins them in high elo. People kind of can, play against, I guess, Tryndamere split push a bit better. He's not going to be allowed to go for flanks as easily. Wukong is not going to be allowed to approach backliners in his invis or things like that, but those are minor things, minor gameplay things. It's mostly that the other champions are just way more suited to how the game is played in higher elo. Gangplank. A Gangplank that's perfectly played is a great pick for high elo. He's going to hold top lane and scale while you get stuff done for the rest of your team. And his ultimate can be super clutch in some situations to just, generate him gold and also just make the situation a bit more outplayable for his team, or just even get kills if it's like some straggler player who's just getting away with like the lowest amount of HP. So yeah. He's better in higher elo, but still pretty difficult to play. Nothing much different with Gwen. Irelia gets abused by junglers way more often, so because of that, she has to go down a tier. She's still a monster in laning 1v1s and stuff like that, but again, she gets torn apart by junglers. Kayle, let's think here. The thing with Kayle is that like she does get abused way more by her junglers, but people can kind of hold games and wait for Kayle to scale up. Right? People get better at just like turtling, holding games. It's like, okay, let's just play safe. Let's wait for the Kayle to scale up and just kind of playing around you, right? Which kind of makes it so like, if you're in low elo and you need time to scale up to 1v9 in the game, your team's going to brain dead to go for fights, not wait and lose the game. But this happens a bit less often, a lot less often in high elo, but it still happens. Kennen is a bit more useful in high elo, just survives lane, quite difficult to put down by junglers, and then can get a lot of work done in team fights. He's essentially a worse version of Gragas in high elo. Pantheon. There's nothing much to really say here. Same description as the low elo one. Quinn. Can get a lot more done with our macro, but people are going to be picking champions that really mess her up in higher ranks, so that's going to be fun. Rengar. People who know how to beat Rengar are just going to be way more common. Like, Rengar is not really a champion you can pick every game, because people will pick, like, there's a bunch of champions in top lane that completely ruin you, and, I'm just going to be real. Darius is meta, so Rengar is just being put down, but yeah, right? Nothing really is different about his description for low elo, but let's just say that you have to be a lot better with him to survive in high elo, not to mention how, like, the champions he kind of dislikes playing against are a bit more meta. So I'll put him in one trick. Just like the same change I did to the low elo tier list. Singed. I'm not going to go near this champion again. I've said my piece. Tahm Kench. People are more used to his tricks. People understand what he's capable of. People aren't going to give him free kills like, oh, hey, I'm standing in the middle of this lane just outside my turret. I wonder what I'm going to do. Oh, you're going to spin me under your turret, aren't you? Yes. How did you know that? I play this video game. It's like, people know his tricks way more often, so it's like you can't really cheese kills that much, but there will still be opportunities, so he's still a decent champion to play. Trundle, kind of the same issues as Olaf, except he's weak against CC, right? He kind of sucks against mobility. He kind of just, aside from his just lane cheese kills, he can't really do that much for his team until later on in the game where he can just run around silence like a complete animal and just eat turrets, right? That's kind of his use. But again, like in team fights, he's not the best unless his team's already winning, stuff like that. Yo, nothing much changed here. Akali, the fact that she can't get through her early lane as consistently is a detriment in that, like, early game skirmishes on top lane don't happen that often, but when they do happen, they're game defining. And playing a champion who can't do anything in these situations is not always great. Cassio, great counter pick, but not always great because she can be destroyed by some champions. Cho'Gath, way too slow, way too predictable. Not as much as, say, you know, some of the lower tier champions, but still, he does get weaker because people know how to play against him, how to dodge abilities, and etc. Mundo is just kind of useless. He just sits in lane and exists. Anything Mundo can do, someone can do better if you just put time into learning them, which is why he's kind of useless in higher ranks. Garen, kind of the same-ish issue where the whole jack of tradesy kind of thing, in that, like, he can do a lot of everything, is not that good because you can just find someone that does what you need for that game infinitely better than the Garen. To play Garen in, like, higher elo and get a lot of work out of him, you basically have to have a lot of macro, a lot of good understanding of vision and how people rotate, and against more organized teams, this is not always possible. Jace does better than he does in low elo, but it's still way worse than he used to do. Jace just sucks right now. Karma, not much different. Kled, a lot of the high tier picks that people often play and stuff put up a very good fight against Kled, which is why he can't really get a lot of work done, because in high elo, your average top laner is going to know how to deal with a Kled. Malphite, just a good counter pick. Sett, his worst, again, his weakest spot in the meta he's ever been. He is just not strong anymore. He needs buffs ASAP. Sion, again, he'll be weak, low tier, unless someone finds a way to break the game with him. Teemo, he becomes a lot more harder to play because people will be looking for kills on you earlier on. Like, junglers will be very much enticed to kill you unless you can just get like a massive slow push and just have complete prio over your lane. But if you do survive that point, then the other hard part about him is using his shrooms properly, which not a lot of players do. Urgot, his early being weak really comes into play at higher ranks because people will just punish that and shut him down. And also, like, although I think you can get a lot of work done with him if you're just really slow and consistent, but it's like why play him when you can just play the rest of these guys? You know, it's like these guys just do the kind of consistent slow. All right, I'm holding this lane, get the kill. I'm setting it up. Just play Ornn or some other champion, right? It's like a lot of champions do what he does better than him. Vayne, she's just there for a counter pick. Vlad, the whole weak early thing kind of ruins it for him. Volibear, way too outplayable, way too slow, and people will be winning lane against him. And once Volibear loses lane, he's completely useless. And what is Warwick doing here? Yorick, winning lane against him just gets way more tough. Him being slow and immobile means that he's oftentimes just killed in ganks when he's trying to side lane. Like, he's too immobile to escape from ganks. He can kind of survive them if he's fed enough, but, you know, good luck getting fed enough. Also, he just does have a bunch of counter picks that completely destroy him. Just not possible to play. Makes the game not possible to play for him. So if you counter pick someone, then he's great. But if you don't, or like if you can't get through lane properly, then he's not that useful for your team as a split pusher. D tier. Illaoi, way too slow, way too useless, way too dodgeable, way too outplayable. She can get locked down and one shot, and people will actually just like focus you down and kill you, right? You don't ever get the whole situation where people just ignore you and you just get too many tentacles off before they can even kill you. People are, okay, Illaoi, kill her, she's gone, next, you know? It's just, you just get focused on and murdered way too quickly. Mordekaiser, way too outplayable, way too slow, and the meta champions of now can sometimes even beat him inside of his ultimate. Like, if you ult a Zarya or something, it's like, yeah, good luck ever catching up to her, let alone landing a single Q and killing her. Nasus, he's okay if your W kind of just straight up counters something that the aim team has that's crucial, but aside from that, he's just not that useful. Way too weak early game, and when he does scale up, he does just get locked down on one shot by backliners anyway, so he runs into those issues as well. Ryze sucks. Yasuo, way too difficult. Swing can't defend himself. And Warwick is worthless. Like, he just doesn't offer his team anything. He just gets kills in lane. But if his laner knows how to play the lane and doesn't just give him kills, then you're getting into a situation where you get a champion on your team that essentially does a tiny bit of everything, but nothing that well. And the enemy champion actually is like a proficient character that does something really well. Oh my god. Sorry for rushing towards the high low tier list, but I just got a little headache, so I had to finish the video. Alright guys, I'm back. I'll try to get more videos out to you guys later on. This month is going to be amazing, but I'll see you in the next video. Peace out. Enjoy the contest.